He is the author of this book that he sent me, Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. Dan, welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for having me on your show. You're doing a fantastic job, and I also wanted to just thank you for your great support of Jan Morgan. Hopefully Arkansas can get her into the governor's seat.
Well, I'm really pleased that you're following that race, because I mean it really is fascinating, the lack of conservatism that we have when compared to the platform and what the people have been voting on. So it's really good that you're watching that. Where are you calling in from right now? Where do you live, Dan?
I live in a city called Saratoga Springs, New York. We're in kind of upstate New York.
Nice.
I happen to be friends with Jan Morgan, and I know personally she is probably the best thing for Arkansas. She's fantastic, and she's a real true patriot. But yeah, I'm from New York, and I like to get down there when I come down to Arkansas, Alabama, some of the southern states. I always feel welcome down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome in Arkansas anytime, and I'd love to have you in the studio, and we can do a whole show together. That'd be fun sometime. So
absolutely.
So this book, and I understand you got another one, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. So I've read parts of your book here, in preparing for this interview, and I have to say, Dan, it really is interesting that you've taken the approach of, okay, let's try to understand why the left, doesn't like the concept of guns. And one of the things that you talk about really is just fear, that they just don't understand and that they're afraid. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, when we talk about fear of guns, the big thing that the anti-gun radicals are doing is they're using fear to manipulate people, to stay scared of guns. Because when people are scared of guns, they don't go to the range. They don't learn. They don't want to get knowledge. Because what happens when you get knowledge on something that you're scared of? The fear goes away. They don't want that. So they'll keep people scared to death of guns. But another thing that they're doing is they like to make those same people angry and hateful toward gun owners. Now, gun owners are the most responsible and respectable people that I've ever met in my life, and it's troubling to see how gun owners get tarnished by the anti-gun left in a way that just really creates a hatred. It's none of it's true. It's all propaganda from the anti-gunners, but the fear and the hate together create a perfect recipe to indoctrinate and create more anti-gunners.
I completely agree with that. I think that is, you're going to feel. I guess we don't see guns as tools anymore. I guess if you go back to the 18th century and beyond we used to see them more often. We would interact with them. They were tools. They weren't what the left basically wants us to think, that they're sentient beings now. They're just floating around ready to kill somebody.
Yeah. They want you to think that the gun is the cause of the violence. That's why they. And here's the thing, Paul. This is at the core of their anti-gun fear campaign. It's a term called gun violence. Everybody's heard it. The reason it doesn't make any sense is because it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as gun violence. There is, however, human violence. But they don't want to look at that, because that most often reflects on failed liberal policies. We could talk about that, but we'd have to talk about poor lack of immigration patrol. We'd have to talk about drugs. We'd have to talk about inner city crime and poverty and all these things that they don't want to focus on. So what they do is they try to take that term violence and the word gun, and they put them together to make people think of guns and violence as synonyms.
One of the things that I thought was really good, we're talking with Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. Matter of fact, we got the website up right now at facebook.com/Conduit News. You guys can go there who are listening.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everybody. How's it going? You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine, and we are so glad that you are with us. Feel free, you can give us a phone call, send us a text message, 870-275-9799, or feel free, sound off on our Facebook page. We're up and going at facebook.com/Conduit News. That's facebook.com/Conduit News. Got a great show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking once again with Mr. Tim Loggins from the Great Patriots of Acts 746. Got a lot of stuff to talk about there. And then, I guess 7:33, we'll be welcoming back to the program, very special treat, Colonel Paul Deckert will be back on the program. He is from the Center for Security Policy, which is a fantastic national security organization. And Colonel Paul Deckert specifically was instrumental a year ago here in Arkansas testifying for State Representative Brant Smith's bill, American Law in American Courts, otherwise known as the Anti-Sharia Law Bill, trying to really get out in front, be proactive, based on, this concept that we maybe don't need to use constitutional law here in the country. And, of course, that bill became law without the governor's signature. He refused to sign it, and now we know why. He is once again saying publicly, well, I mean, we knew what he was saying behind the scenes. We knew the pressure he was putting on people not to vote for this thing. But Governor Asa Hutchinson now says he doesn't think the law was necessary. And we're gonna get Colonel Paul Deckert's comments on that, his thoughts on that, coming up at 7:33. But let's actually just get to this article where Asa said this, because he actually said some other things. If you go to the top of this article, Joe, or start at the very top, this is Talk Business and Politics. This is George Jared. The headline has to do with Jan Morgan and Governor Asa Hutchinson. And I will have to say I applaud Talk Business and Politics for doing this story, because they got Asa Hutchinson to comment. They got Asa Hutchinson to react and respond to Jan Morgan calling him a Democrat. I was there at this gathering in Northeast Arkansas in Jonesboro, and it was actually quite a very funny line, kind of a throwaway that we've got to I believe what Jan Morgan was talking about here, the headline, by the way, Morgan says Governor Hutchinson is a Democrat, vows to fight Sharia law. I believe what Jan was talking about here is that if she wins the Republican nomination, that they're going to go on to beat the Democrat, no problem. And then I think she said, but we got to beat the Democrat in my primary first. And people laughed because it's funny. People also laughed, and the best humor has a shred of truth in it. And in this case, there's a lot of truth in that statement. But here's the thing. This is, well, I mean, you be the judge. I guess I don't know if I'm pretty frustrated with the governor. I mean, all of you know that. I'm frustrated with his record. I'm frustrated with where he's taking this state. I'm frustrated that it's not a conservative direction. But, folks, I guess I'm frustrated at the lack of principle of the governor today, because he is unwilling to stand by his record, and the evidence is in this article with a statement when he responds to Jan Morgan. Joe, can you go down to the statement where he actually responds to what Jan Morgan is saying? Governor Asa Hutchinson, quote, "My opponent in the primary continues to make up facts as she continues to distort the record and mislead the voters." Okay, so I mean, somebody's misleading somebody, right? Because, Jan Morgan says one thing, you say that's misleading. You're saying this, and I'm saying that that's misleading. So somebody's not being honest here in the Republican primary, and it's not Jan Morgan. My opponent in the primary continues to make up facts as she continues to distort the record and mislead the voters. He goes on. The General Assembly has not passed any tax increases. Now let's stop right there. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a false statement. That is a false statement. That is a falsehood. Let's just exactly the tire tax bill. Let's focus on that one and that one alone. Let's forget about the proposed tax increases he supported, like the internet tax and the gas tax and things like that. Let's forget about that, and let's just focus on a bill that created an environment that created basically an agency that's got an environmental protection charter because the tires were a threat to us because of the Zika virus, and so because tires store water, even though we've had Sonny's auto salvage owner Artie Hopper on that says, you know what, if you don't want the tires to hold water, you just got to cut them 4 times. You just cut the tires up. He says, I have a tire cutter, and that solves the problem. But no, this was about a cradle-to-grave tire tracking system. Very, very odd. More government regulation. Actually hurts people who sell tires on the side, making them comply with all this stuff. But in order to do all of this, they created a brand new tire tax, and then they increased the current tire tax. That is a tax increase. And, I mean, I guess the governor could stick to his guns and say, no, that's a fee. We just imposed a fee. But that's a tax, and a fee and a tax are the same thing, and most Arkansans are going to get that. And if there's anybody in the Republican Party that disputes this fact, I mean, are you really going to use semantics when we're talking about the same thing, and that's more money out of the pockets of the people of Arkansas when they go and buy tires? And by the way, tires are already taxed with a federal excise tax. Now we add the state taxes to it, and he wants more taxes to pay for our roads, and yet we're already giving him all kinds of money to do these things the government's already supposed to be doing, and he's mismanaging our money because he spent $600 million. So, and increased government by $600 million. So, I guess the question here today is, do we say lie? I mean, I just said falsehood. The General Assembly has not passed any tax increases. That is a lie. That is not true. You can go look at it. It was a bill by State Representative Lanny Fight, a Republican. As a matter of fact, I mean, I had Donnie Copeland on. I remember I was down at the Marble Palace. I was broadcasting from there. Back when we were on in the afternoons, and people were like, well, surely the Republicans aren't going to do this. And that's exactly what they did. They pushed through and voted for a tire tax increase and created a brand new tire tax. And the testimony from left-wing lunatics in the committee, I was in the committee, and they had testimony from this lady who was crazy. And you would have thought that Republicans all of a sudden were members of George Soros-funded Sierra Club because they were eating these arguments up. They didn't even get challenged. And she was sitting there saying, well, we need to do this because Zika is a threat, and the Zika virus and mosquitoes are going to breed in the tires when they retain water. And it was the biggest bunch of bull that you can imagine. And that's what, and Asa Hutchinson supported it. That's what Asa Hutchinson wanted for whatever reason. I don't know if somebody is going to get a contract somewhere down the road to manage the cradle-to-grave tire tracking system, because that's eventually what they want. You got to save us from Zika. You know, when we all voted, when conservatives voted for the Republican Asa Hutchinson over Mike Ross, you know, that was a huge campaign. We were all like, we want to be saved from Zika. What are you going to do about the Zika virus? The tires, they're killing our children. That was a huge campaign issue, right? Yeah. Obamacare wasn't, though, and that wasn't a huge issue. Spending wasn't a huge issue. Second Amendment, not a huge issue. It was the tires. The tires are coming for us. The tires, the mutant tires. Let's just make it as sensational as possible. So I'm saying that that's a lie, and here's why I'm disappointed in it, because, well, okay, let's just editorialize. What it shows you is Governor Asa Hutchinson is not going to stand on his record. Governor Asa Hutchinson, in order to win, is going to adopt our arguments. In order to win, Asa Hutchinson is going to run to the right and claim that he isn't a tax and spend liberal, that he is a fiscally responsible conservative that has cut your taxes, instead of standing by his record. Instead of saying, yep, we did increase taxes here. I mean, we lowered income taxes here. We gave you the military retirement tax cut, but we also, that it was actually a tax increase because we took more money from the people than we were taking from previously when it was all said and done. The digital downloads tax, that was a new tax we created. The tire tax, raising that, increasing it, creating a new tire tax. And instead of Asa admitting to all of this, because it is of public record and it is of fact, and then saying, now let me tell you why we needed it. Let me tell you why it was a good thing. Let me tell you why I'm right. Let me take my argument to the people and let me tell you why this needed to happen. Instead of just admitting to what the reality is and trying to defend what he's done, he wants to mislead. He wants to lie because he wants to maintain his power. And it's just an admission that this state and the base that he has to talk to is much more conservative than he represents, than he governs. It's absolutely maddening. I mean, it is very, very frustrating. I so wish we could just have an honest debate. I so wish he could try to honestly sell us this moderate Republican progressive ideology. Just own up to it and try to sell it to the people, okay? And let's have an honest debate about it. Let you tell us, Governor, why, you know what, sometimes you just have to raise taxes to fund a tire program to save us from Zika. Why don't you just explain that to us? And admit it's a tax increase. Don't call it a fee. Don't treat the people like we're idiots, that we don't understand that now when we go to get new tires, to buy new tires, we're paying more for those tires because of you. But we're not going to get that. That's really the news here. Because of George Jared's article, because of Talk Business and Politics, getting Asa to respond, you can infer a lot from this, and that's that Asa is not going to admit his record. He's not going to stand by his record. He's going to try to cloak it. He's going to try to deceive, and he's going to do that by lying when he says that the General Assembly and his administration hasn't passed any tax increases. The tire tax bill was a tax increase on the people of Arkansas. The digital downloads, tax increase. Candy and soda going to the full 6.5% state sales tax increase. What we are seeing here is that he has to take the other sides. In the Republican Party, it is split. You have true conservatives, and you have these people who, I don't like to play on the Democrat side of things. They don't really believe in the Republican Party platform. Like State Representative Charlie Collins said, he's got a lot of great ideas that aren't in there yet. One of those ideas was like a millionaire's yacht tax. And so, that's the divide. It's actually a much harder game than convincing people to vote for Republicans over Democrats. Now we have to find, okay, who is the actual who actually believes in the campaign, who in the platform, who actually believes in what the people say they want. And this is now our battleground. But Asa's not going to have the moderate debate, even though. Listen to the rest of his statement here. Listen to the rest of his statement. To say I'm not conservative, now he's addressing Jan Morgan here, quote, to say I'm not conservative is pretty hilarious. When you have been criticized as long as I have for standing for conservative values, you wonder where Jan has been for the last 40 years. End quote. That's spoken like a true Bush. That's spoken like a true establishment Republican. I've been a Republican for 40 years. Who do you think you are? Criticizing me as not being conservative. You see, he doesn't want to admit, look, the political ideology has surpassed Asa Hutchinson. Asa Hutchinson's political ideology worked when he was an Arkansas Republican in a deeply blue Democrat state of Arkansas. That is Asa Hutchinson's brand. What kind of Republican do you think that is? That gets anywhere politically when you are in the deep blue real Bill Clinton out in the open controlled state. During a Bill Clinton presidency, nonetheless. I've been a Republican for 40 years. Don't question my conservative credentials. I mean, good grief. You could basically just take Hutchinson's name out of here and you could put McConnell or John Kasich or any one of these any one of these guys who thinks, well, I've served my time. See, the governor from the beginning, it was his turn to be governor. He had put in his time to be governor. He was in the this is not something that it can be taken away from him. And so he's not going to, I mean, and much of this is just, it's insulting. We are beneath him unless it's an election year. And now he has to claim that he is the greatest conservative since Ronald Reagan or the next Barry Goldwater or whatever. And it's simply not true. Asa Hutchinson has a record, and he doesn't want to stand by the record. He wants to claim he is something he is not. By any objective standard, yes, they did raise taxes. By any objective standard, yes, government has grown by, at this point, over $500 million, but it will be $600 million if he gets his way, for the last fiscal year. This is not a conservative direction that we're moving. I know people try to lie to themselves and say, well, things are better than if there'd be a Democrat. No. If Mike Ross were in the governor's office right now, the legislature would not have gone along with Obamacare, would not have gone along with this level of spending. They wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing. There would be true revolts among, if the leadership tried to make deals with Democrats, they wouldn't be in the leadership next time. I can promise you that. If there was a Democrat in the governor's mansion. Tell me what you think about this. This quote today from the governor is big time. And then it says here, George Jared writes, as to Sharia law, Governor Asa Hutchinson said the legislation was a solution in search of a problem. We will have Colonel Paul Deckert from the Center for Security Policy on in about an hour to address those comments. And it's going to be, I'm just going to predict right now, it's going to be very savage because the governor is using... really, he's using talking points from the left. But he's not a leftist. He is a conservative that has cut your taxes, and they haven't raised any taxes anywhere. Give me a break. Just stand by your record, Governor. Let's have an honest debate. I mean, you can always walk this back. Let's have an honest debate. Admit you passed a tire tax. Admit you supported it. Admit you wanted to save us from Zika, and just tell us why it was a good thing instead of trying to say, no, we didn't pass any taxes and everything's fine. We have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment. In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal.
Ethics.
Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It's some people telling me to breathe on Facebook. Levita on Facebook. Breathe, Paul. I know I am worked up. I do need to breathe. It just is really, really frustrating when it's frustrating when these people acknowledge the criticism and just deny. No, I didn't do it. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. I mean, look, this is the governor's spokesperson. Look at this on Twitter. J.R. Davis. Talk Business and Politics tweets this article out, and I say, no, this is ridiculous. I say, talk about misleading. You know, he accuses Jan Morgan of misleading people, and that's projection and deflection. It's one of the ways to grow government, and he's actually just projecting exactly what he is doing, which is misleading. I said, you and the General Assembly increased taxes on tires, created a new tax to grow government, supposedly to keep the people safe from Zika, remember? Or was it a cradle-to-grave tire tracking system? Which one was it? And the governor's spokesperson tweets back at me and says, dude, quote, dude, comma, you're straight tripping on your facts. I'm straight tripping on my facts, according to the governor's spokesperson, J.R. Davis, who responded to this criticism. Boy, they're really feeling the heat and reacting to the criticism. And then he actually sends this meme or whatever. I guess it's a GIF. Hey, Joe, can you get this thing working? This is one of my favorite actors here is Mark Wahlberg. Why is this not working? Why does this GIF quit working for us? Anyway, yeah, there it is. He sends this GIF of Mark Wahlberg from I don't know what movie that is. Honestly, is that the one where it's like a Daddy's Home? Yeah. I've seen that one. But anyway, so it's Mark Wahlberg saying, stop it. So J.R. Davis, governor's spokesperson, tweets at me, dude, you're straight up tripping on your facts, and tweets at me, Mark Wahlberg, which is, it's really, really funny. Anyway, I really like Marky Mark. I like Mark Wahlberg. I like his acting. Anyway, they're just, I guess, they're trying to they're just trying to laugh at us because we laugh at them. it's just goodgunbadguy.net. That's goodgunbadguy.net. One of the things I thought was fascinating is that you, in your book, you talk about how you grew up around guns, but the anti-gun left in the media and the narrative eventually convinced you as a younger man that guns were actually bad. And then you kind of had an awakening. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And the thing that I call it my saving grace was that I did have experience when I was a kid. I knew how to shoot guns and how to handle them properly because my dad taught me when I was a kid. We went hunting and target shooting and things. But he died when I was 24, and I went on. I was playing in rock bands most of my life, and I was kind of hanging with the wrong crowd, so to speak. I was hanging with people who, they weren't bad people, but they were more anti-gun, liberal-type people. And what happens is when you're in an environment like that, you start to take on the beliefs and the thought process of the environment that you're in. This is just human nature. And I started to create and develop almost a hatred toward guns until I started to, there's a point when you have to let logic take over, and then you can't lie to yourself anymore. And I started to do that. I started to realize that, what the heck am I thinking here? This is just crazy. And then I had a situation in my own life where a gun may have come in handy. Thankfully it didn't. But I tell the story in the book. But it was an awareness. It was a moment of clarity, an aha moment type of thing. And I said, geez, I'm really on the wrong side of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is just bad. So that's how it kind of turned around. So I've been on both sides of this conversation, and I can tell you, on the left, on the anti-gun side of the conversation, it is nothing but lies, rhetoric, propaganda, and nonsense, skewed statistics, and all sorts of stuff. But because I've seen it from both perspectives.
The left wants to take away our guns, right? I mean, that's their long game, right? They really want to confiscate all weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal. They want to restrict gun owners of their Second Amendment right because, for a couple reasons that I've come to learn, is that first of all, it's fear among the anti-gunners, but it's a sense of control from the anti-second radicals. And when I decipher the difference in the book between anti-second radicals and anti-gunners, the anti-gunners are the victims in this whole thing because they fall prey to the propaganda. But they really do want to they want a gun-free America, and it's the most destructive thing that you could do. Is exactly what.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us. My name is Paul Harrell. So check this out. We have on the line with us Mr. Tim Loggins is back on the program. Tim, how you doing?
Good morning, Paul. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing very well. Just want to tell everybody this segment is brought to you by the Great Patriots of Act 746. They're on a mission to educate folks in Arkansas about their Second Amendment rights, about the fact that we are a constitutional carry state, and you guys are doing great. That group is, last time I checked, did it hit 12,000? I think it did, Tim.
Yes, sir. We bypassed 12,000 about 2 weeks ago.
There we go, 12,000. And also, you're kind of an integral organizer of different, they're trying to get different chapters, and you're in charge of the one up in Northeast Arkansas. And that just started, I guess, late last year. And you guys have how many members now up here?
I checked this morning, and we're at 573 members since November 30th.
That's incredible. And what are most people already aware of their ability to open carry, concealed carry without a permit, or is this shocking to them? And when they find out, is it like a little kid on Christmas morning? Or what's the feel out there?
Most people that join the group, they're joining for knowledge. They think they know what the law is. They know what they've been told by their buddy and their friend, and twice removed on the conversation. But they're trying to get the facts, and we have some pretty interesting conversations on the group on both the local chapter and the main page. Folks are really anxious and ready to learn what their rights are.
And that's exactly what you guys are out to do, and I think you're accomplishing that. And you guys are a force to be reckoned with, really. I mean, and you've set yourself out to be these really just the authority on this issue, and it's really good. And the efforts to communicate with law enforcement and things like that are also really, really good. So let's talk though about this enhanced carry bill. We have the governor last week. He posts on Facebook, trying to take a victory lap here, that there's now 70 instructors across the state that are ready to go to teach the enhanced carry class. Did you see that post, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I continue to see our governor post. I did see that one. In essence, to me, he's doubling down on his stance that we are not truly a constitutional carry state. And I think that's what he wants as opposed to what he knows the law says. And he continues to double down on it. I mean, wow, we've got 70 instructors. We got 75 counties. We don't even have one for every county. I wouldn't brag on that.
I mean, versus the if you just look at the straight up concealed carry class and everything else, I mean, there was way more than 70 instructors, right? I mean, am I wrong there?
No, you're right, Paul. He's trying to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess. He's put himself in an untenable position, and he has to continue trying to toe that line, and it's getting even more difficult for him as the days go by.
Yeah, because on this program, I actually thought that Facebook post was almost a direct response from programs like this one that have highlighted the fact that concealed carry, that the bill is such a mess, and it was done to satisfy Asa politically, so he didn't have to veto and come out as being against the Second Amendment. So they contorted this bill that was very simple at first. And they did all this stuff because they were worshiping the R, at the end of his last name, the Republican R. And yet we've talked about how there are instructors all across the state that have thought about just giving up. Just like, we're just going to quit teaching altogether because now the state has made it even more complicated, and it's just more restrictions.
Well, Paul, I looked, and there's over 40 pages of regulations. From what I can see of it, you're going to have average citizens that are breaking the law and don't even know it. The state said that when they filed the bill that it would be a nominal fee. Well, I've been checking online, and I'm seeing classes offered for $150 if you already have the regular CHCL. I'm going to tell you what, Paul, that's not nominal to me. $150 is a pretty good chunk of change. That nominal to me is like what I spend for a Coke.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to protect yourself, you got to have money. You have to be of a certain class. In Arkansas, they're putting this out. If you want to protect yourself, you have to be of a certain class or a tier in society in order to do that legally.
Well, Paul, the governor addressed, I believe it was January 30th, he addressed the Sheriff's Association. And he made a statement to them that there's nothing inconsistent about requiring a CHCL to carry. He went on and doubled down on the you can open carry. He's not wanting to touch the cost and the separate classes that he's creating in Arkansas. But I believe he truly believes, and he said it to the Sheriff's Association, that in his opinion, it's just common sense that you have to have training and meet certain requirements in order to, exercise your Second Amendment right. And I think he truly believes that. He calls it a privilege on purpose. He doesn't think it's a right.
No, yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. And, he does call it a privilege. He doesn't believe it's a right. And he thinks that the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. He thinks that, is that the government has a role to essentially control who can have a weapon and who can have a weapon. I mean it is crazy. It's crazy. It's like the most unconservative thing that you can think.
I think the key word you just said there, Paul, was control, which is a progressive stance, not a conservative stance, but I think he believes in the control of the people. And quite honestly, I think he's forgotten the role of the governor. He wants to be able to write legislation instead of enforce the law. The law is clear. We are a constitutional carry state. 573-120 is very clear, crystal clear. The Constitution of the state of Arkansas, very clear. But yet that doesn't fit what he wants, so he goes out there and continues to push this fake narrative. And quite honestly, if we didn't have Jan Morgan, I believe he'd be silent on it.
Yeah,
but he's kind of been forced into these statements that are just inconsistent and crazy with what the law says.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have even come out and said that we're a constitutional carry state. And then, of course, the way he defines constitutional carry is not the actual definition. So he comes out with the carefully crafted language and the buzzword. He does that like 2 days before Jan Morgan formally announces her campaign for governor. It's obvious. It's clear if it wasn't for, and in many ways to look at it, looking at it that way, Jan Morgan's candidacy is already a success in many ways, because you're forcing the governor to acknowledge that there is, people out there who actually are for limited government, for, personal protection, personal freedom, individual liberty, which we've been ignored the entire time he's been in office so far. Now, I fully expect the governor to swing right back to the left if he survives this primary, which I think if you're looking at some of the statements he's making addressing Jan Morgan head on, I think they're nervous. I would bet they've got polling that is not really looking too good for him right now, and that's why that they're starting to kind of go out on the offensive. And the offensive is, as I talked about in my first segment, just lie and don't admit that your record is what it is. Hey, can you talk about? We're talking with Tim Loggins from Patriots of Act 746. Tim, can you talk about? A couple of weeks ago, and we interviewed her, Senator Linda Collins Smith. She wrote a letter to the Attorney General asking for an opinion about what the penalty is specifically the penalty is for carrying a weapon, and I believe concealed without a permit. Is that true? Okay, go ahead.
Her request to the Attorney General was, what is the penalty for carrying a weapon concealed without a permit? And what law says you can't do it? And it was very simple questions. And they can't be answered because there is no law and there is no penalty. This is a no-brainer for the Attorney General to come out on the side of right, on the side of the people. And we're still hopeful that she will.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but I mean, this was forced by, the governor's statement, which was just crazy, Paul, when he said that each county prosecutor could interpret the law differently, and open carry is legal, but
check with your local
concealed carry, you got to have a permit. I mean, he didn't base that on any statute. That's what he wants the law to be. That's not what the law says. That's what he wants it to be.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't done a good enough job really kind of camping out on that statement when he says, but check your local prosecutor. What kind of a Wild West government is this guy promoting? We are the sovereign state of Arkansas. I don't want my governor saying, well, the law could mean this, but, this is what I think it means, but check with your local What is going on? You're the executive. Your job is to execute the law. And yet he's basically saying, well, we can have a patchwork framework of, the same law can mean different things in different parts of the state. That is not good government. If you're on the left or the right, that is not good government.
Well, imagine if we apply that same standard to DWIs or robbery or assault and battery. Imagine that standard being applied unequally across the state, and you realize how crazy that statement is. And, oh, by the way, Arkansas has a preemption statute that says that localities cannot interpret gun laws differently. They have to follow one law. So, I mean, not only did he lie, he's telling the state police to break Arkansas law. And he's trying to give the county prosecutors the authority to break the law, and he doesn't have that authority. It's beyond comprehension.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really, truly is. So you mentioned the Sheriff's Association and Ace's comments at the Sheriff's Association. First of all, what were some of the reaction from the sheriffs? I mean, what is law enforcement? What are their take on this? I mean, I have to think that there are some, because I've talked to some, honestly, who really don't like the idea of open carry. They don't like this. They don't like this change, right? But then you talk to others that understand, hey, actually, an armed society is a polite society, and policemen can't be there all the time, and we want people to be able to protect themselves. How does the Sheriff's Association, and I know it may be tough to give a general statement, but what was the feel there?
Well, I can't speak for the Sheriff's Association meeting. I do know we've reached out to every sheriff's office in the state, and, you know, local jurisdictions, they know what the law is. They've spoken to their local prosecutors. They know a case is not going to be prosecuted unless there's unlawful intent to employ against a person. So they know it was posturing. Even the article that came out on Arkansas Online said that, you know, the sheriffs aren't subject to the governor's opinion. And that's what it is. It's just an opinion. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, law enforcement across this state, they know what the law is. They've spoken to their prosecutors, and they might not want to speak out publicly on it. But when you speak to them, they know what the law is.
Are the sheriffs aware that, you know, I mean, sure they are, but Jan Morgan challenging him and the Second Amendment is a key issue that differs, you know, separates these two candidates? Are they aware of that, you think? Have you talked to any of them?
They are aware of Jan Morgan. They are aware of her Second Amendment defense. They know her stance on it. As a matter of fact, Jan did visit the Sheriff's Association the day after the governor was there.
Good.
And she was able to speak to many of them, you know, privately. Of course, she wasn't a keynote speaker like the governor, but she was able to meet and talk to them. I've got some friends that were there at the meeting, and you know, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, this Jan Morgan, I really like what she has to say."
Good. Last question, Tim. Have you been doing some political spotlights? I hear. Tell us what those are all about.
I feel like one of the duties of a citizen is to be informed. It's not enough to vote; you have to have an informed vote. And what we've started in the Northeast Arkansas chapter is we're doing a political spotlight each week on our local representatives, and that's from the county level all the way up to the state level. So far, we've covered Senator Linda Collins Smith, Representative Dan Sullivan, Representative Brant Smith. The last one I did was Representative James Sturch, who's challenging Linda Collins Smith. Mm-hmm. And all we're trying to do is just what their record is, their voting record, their stated stances versus their voting record. And I want the Patriots in Northeast Arkansas to know where their local officials stand at. And I base it on their voting record and personal conversations with candidates. I'm reaching out to every candidate. I've spoken to, you know, almost every elected official in Northeast Arkansas.
So it's just about really just information, you know, and letting people, so when they do go to vote, because, I mean, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of voters, you know, who are out there who are actively voting every single cycle, you know, who are members of the Patriots of Act 746. It's just a kind of an information campaign. Hey, you know, we want you to be as educated as you possibly can be when you go into that voting booth.
Exactly. And you know, politicians will say anything. But we want them to know not only what they say, but what they've done. What does their record reflect? You know, what is their true stance on yes, the Second Amendment, but other issues as well. We concentrate on the Second Amendment issues, but we talk about how conservative are they. You know, I've reached out to Fran Kavanaugh, Joe Jett, basically all the candidates in Northeast Arkansas, and had those conversations, and I'm going to continue doing that.
Good.
And whatever their record is, good or bad, you know, that's what I'm going to write. Representative Sturch wouldn't return my calls or my messages, and I had to do it based solely off of his record and you know, some articles that Conduit had done. Yeah,
well, that's a good source. That's
unfortunate.
No, it's a really good source, and matter of fact, it inspires me. When I come back from break here, I'm just going to do a little recap on State Representative James Sturch for our audience. We're out of time. Tim Loggins with Patriots of Act 746. I appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and it's always a pleasure to have you on and talk about things.
Yes, sir. I've enjoyed it.
All righty. Be safe.
Thanks, Paul.
Have a great morning. And folks, again, you can check out the Patriots of Act 746. Just go to Facebook.com and search for them. There's a lot of them listening right now on our video stream, Facebook.com/Conduit News. But it's very, very easy. Just the Patriots of Act 746. Just put it in your search bar. You're going to see them. It's a closed group, so you're gonna request permission to become a member of that group. But you can feel free and do that if you want more information. If you want to join in, really what is an ideological battle of whether you have the right to protect yourself without needing a permission slip from the government, or whether or not you or your local community knows that possession of a weapon has now been decriminalized and the burden of proof has increased significantly on prosecution if they want to charge you with possession of a weapon. You can find all of that stuff out at the Patriots of Act 746 Facebook page, and do that right now. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. My name is Paul Harrell. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
Our nation's motto, "In God We Trust," first appeared in 1864. Secretary of Treasury Chase stated that no nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe except in His defense. And the trust of our people in God should be declared on our nation's coins. President Dwight Eisenhower then adopted "In God We Trust" as our nation's official motto in 1956. Act 911, enacted by the 2017 Arkansas General Assembly, states that if funds are available, durable framed copies of our nation's motto, "In God We Trust," shall be placed in public school classrooms, libraries, or any publicly maintained facilities. Posters may be donated or provided through voluntary contributions. If you're interested, please contact me at 870-275-2929. This is Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Jan Morgan will be in Fort Smith. I'm telling you, I want to reiterate something. So on Monday, Jan Morgan was in Jonesboro. It was a packed house. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been going to events like this for a long time. The Northeast Arkansas Tea Party really did it great. I hope they got the contact information of everybody that showed up. That was new, just to hear what she had to say. It was fantastic. Jan Morgan tonight is in Fort Smith for a meet and greet, and it's at the Senior Citizen Center. It starts at 6 o'clock. It's going to last till 8 o'clock, and the address is 2700 Kavanaugh Road in Fort Smith at 72908. That's 2700 Kavanaugh Road, Fort Smith, Arkansas, 72908. So all of our listeners listening on the Marshall right now in Fort Smith, you guys need to get out and you need to go hear what your choices are. This is very clear. This is very important. You're going to have a choice. The primary now in Arkansas between Republicans is the general election. And so why it's very easy to get hyped up, and we've got primaries that are coming up. I'm sorry, not primaries, but midterm elections coming up in November, and it's very easy to get hyped up for those. Obviously, that's where the national media's focus is going to be. Will the Democrats take the House? Will the Republicans hold the House? Blah, blah, blah. All that is very important, and it's not important yet. It will be important, but as far as Arkansans go, this is what is important. Your primaries are important. That will determine the direction where this state goes, that will determine where your local government goes. Does it continue to grow or does it actually shrink? Do we have people who are going to stand up to the status quo? Jan Morgan is anti-establishment. Jan Morgan will change things. And so if you're fine with the status quo, great. I would still encourage you to go out and listen to her to see what your options are. If you're sick of the status quo, definitely go so you can hear who the other option is. And I really, really commend Jan Morgan because in all of her events, I've been watching them, and she has been saying, you guys are going to have a choice. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to provide you with a second option, a choice in the Republican. This is Ace's record, and this is what I think is wrong with that record, and this is what I'm going to do going forward. So all of our listeners, and really all of our listeners across the state, if you guys want to make the trek up to Fort Smith to see her, feel free to do that. But everybody listening on KFPW in Fort Smith, that's the Marshall, that's 1230 AM and 96.7 FM. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate this great affiliate for carrying Conduit News Radio, and just wanted to let everybody know that tonight, again, Fort Smith at the Senior Citizen Center, that's 2700 Kavanaugh Road. Jan Morgan will be there from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock tonight. Speaking of James Sturch, which we talked about in the last segment, just to kind of give you a recap, this is a State Representative James Sturch. He's a young guy, and he is the governor's chosen candidate, lapdog candidate, to challenge Linda Collins Smith out of the Senate. That's another primary that's taking place. Now, Senator Linda Collins Smith, one of the most conservative senators that we have. She's a rock star as far as I'm concerned. She's willing to stand up. She's willing to call a spade, and they can't stand her for it. And if I'm honest, I also think there's a threat of sexism that goes on down there because she's a woman and she's a strong conservative. There, I said it. That's just my opinion. I think there's some of that going on. But aside from that, she is got a great record, and James Sturch has a liberal record. James Sturch is the governor's candidate that he has chosen to try to unseat Linda Collins Smith. Now, based on all of that, let's look at what State Representative James Sturch has done. Okay, he killed special election reform. There's a video out there. You can see him get a text message and get up, walk out of the chamber at the exact moment that his name is called after he's already voted yes for it, and he is the deciding vote that kills it. He votes yes, they do a sound the ballot, and then he gets a text message, looks, and he says, uh-oh, I've got to kill this bill. And so he killed special election reform that would have limited special election tax increases that go on all the time. But you know what he also did? This is the most interesting part. He supported and then didn't support school choice. And, you know, this is crazy because he even said it. He went down to the well to speak against school choice, which is a key plank in the Republican platform. Jim Dotson, Representative Dotson, had this amazing bill that was actually very minuscule concerning what we need to do with school choice. I mean, what the ultimate goal is. We couldn't even get the ball started. James Sturch goes down there and says, this is the first time I've ever come to the well of the House of Representatives to speak for or against something. And you know the first time, what that first time was? To speak against school choice, a key plank in the Republican Party platform. This is Ace's guy to try to unseat one of the most conservative senators that we have, fighting for her district and fighting for policies that'll be great for all Arkansans. Folks, we got one more hour coming your way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
What they're doing. This is what causes violence. This is gun-free zones, for instance. I was just kind of going on some of the anti-gun websites and seeing what they're talking about these days. And you go to Crazy Town and Demanding Moms and all these anti-gun sites. And what they're trying to do right now is scare people by saying that they need these bulletproof backpacks for the children in schools because of all these crazy shootings. It's a problem that they created with gun-free zones, and they perpetrate the fear and they perpetrate the problem by keeping these places gun-free, because what happens is you invite maniacs when they know that there's no armed opposition. In other words, you can't, if you're a teacher, you can't have a concealed carry, and they even keep armed guards away from the school. They don't want any guns there. So what happens is the crazies go there. 69% of the time, killers will choose gun-free zones over places that...
Yes.
So what they're doing is they're creating a problem, and they're festering it and making it worse, and they're using it to scare people.
Can you mentioned Mom's Demand, Mom's Demand Action. What can you tell us about that group? Because it's kind of like they've taken the, from an anti-gun stance, they're like, okay, we got real, with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, you put moms in front of it. I feel like that was their tactic. They're like, oh, we'll be more effective if we remind everybody that we're moms.
Yeah, well, yeah, good point. I call them the demanding moms. But I think they're just another one of those groups that people will latch on to these people who are already scared of guns will go to these groups for reassurance. Here's the thing. People have beliefs about guns, that guns are scary and guns are dangerous and all this stuff. And they want support groups that don't tell them necessarily the truth, but that reinforce their current beliefs. So these groups are perfect for people who already hate guns to go and kind of gather with and soak up the propaganda and the rhetoric and feel good about themselves, because once they have that reassurance from groups like Demanding Moms and Crazy Town, they feel better about themselves, almost like their thoughts and their beliefs are true because they have backup reinforcement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's strength in numbers. When you're in a group, people feel more confident in their opinions. I mean, right now I'm looking at a photo, Dan. I don't know if you follow this. I know you're following Jan Morgan and you're friends with her and you support her run for governor. But back during the last session last year, they were trying to pass a Second Amendment, bill that really just was more restrictions to our rights. And Asa met with Mom's Demand and had a nice little photo op with them, and we've got that photo right now up on the screen. And it's just very, very frustrating, because you're just thinking, what if you're really pro Second Amendment? Like, why would you meet with this group that is anti-Second Amendment? I mean, completely anti-Second Amendment, even though they claim that they're not. They claim that they're just for reasonable. That phrase is always troublesome. We want reasonable gun control. Oh yeah, well, exactly. Well, first of all, let me just address that reasonable gun control one. Here's the problem with this is people are being trained to not see and understand the difference between a right and a privilege. And Jan and I talk about this all the time. There's a distinct difference. A privilege is something that's given by man, can be taken away by man. It's often used as leverage. You tell your kid, well, you didn't eat your dinner, now you lose the privilege of staying up past 9 o'clock. A privilege can be taken away. A right cannot be taken away. A right is inherent and God-given, if you will. So what's happening is people are being trained in our society to blur the two. So this is why you can have exactly what you're talking about. This is why you can have someone say, well, I support, the Second Amendment, but I think we need common sense gun restrictions. Well, you can't do both. You can't support
my right to keep and bear while restricting my right to keep and bear. It doesn't make sense. But they think this is okay because they see rights as privileges.
Well, and I'm really interested. It's great that you said that.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right. It's hour number 2. Welcome. Good morning to everybody out there. Thanks so much. Hope everybody is getting around safe. I know, there's a lot of freezing precipitation, rather, that came through the state last night. So everybody be safe out there. We didn't even mention it the first hour. But you know what we did mention the first hour? You guys have got to go read this Talk Business and Politics article. We're going to talk about it at 7:33 a little bit more in depth. We're going to have Colonel Paul Deckert back on the program from the Center for Security Policy to address. They say, what's Colonel Paul Deckert and the Center for Security Policy got to do with something that Asa Hutchinson said? Well, stay tuned, 7:33, and you'll find out. The first part of this response, this is all an article where Jan Morgan at an event in Northeast Arkansas on Monday called Asa Hutchinson a Democrat. Oh, boy, it was great. I loved it when she did it, and I think she needs to keep doing it. People on social media everywhere, Asa's the best Democrat governor we've ever had. Or they'll say, Asa's the best Democrat governor the Democrats have ever had because he gets to implement their policies and gets to be cloaked and say, oh, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a conservative. But you need to check this out. If you missed the first hour, we kind of went a little bit more in-depth with this on this comment right here. Asa responds to Jan, quote, my opponent in the primary continues to make up facts as she continues to distort the record and mislead the voters. The General Assembly has not passed any tax increases. That is a lie. We established that firmly last hour. Go check it out. He goes on, and my administration has lowered taxes by over $150 million a year. Well, it's actually $100 million a year. The $50 million hasn't kicked in yet. But you've grown spending by $600 million. So congratulations, government has grown. What do you think? Oh, I've cut your taxes by $150 million, but I've increased spending $600 million. He goes on to say, quote, to say I'm not conservative is pretty hilarious. So he thinks it's funny. So, that's great. I'm not a comedian, but it's interesting that when Asa listens to this show, he thinks that it's hilarious. It's good. We're making the governor laugh. We're entertaining him. When he hears about his liberal voting record and me call him, I say he's not a conservative all the time. Apparently, he thinks it's hilarious. It's funny. Well, at least he's got a smile on his face, right? It's better than a frown. It just takes more muscles to frown, Governor, than it does to smile. So, congratulations. Here we go. He thinks it's hilarious. He says, when you've been criticized as long as I have for standing for conservative values, you wonder where Jan has been the last 40 years. So he insinuates that, first of all, I've been doing this for 40 years, Jan, and I've earned this. This is my time. And then he kind of insinuates that the criticism that Jan Morgan is leveling at his way is because he is a conservative. It's really kind of weird. Jan is saying he's not a conservative, that he's a liberal. Anyway, called him a Democrat. It's funny. But this is what we're going to explore. Throw the article back up there, Joe. Go to the last paragraph. At 7:33 with Colonel Paul Deckert, George Jared writes this. And as to Sharia law, Governor Hutchinson said the legislation was a solution in search of a problem. Quote, I have practiced law for many years in Arkansas, and we do not have Sharia law in Arkansas. Let me be clear, I oppose Sharia law. Furthermore, I oppose Sharia law being used in Arkansas courts. The legislation in question addressed the application of foreign law, not Sharia law. Well, what the heck do you think foreign law, Sharia law is? It's foreign law. He goes on. We need to stop passing unnecessary laws that attempt to address problems that do not exist. He goes on, I allowed the bill to become law even though I thought it was not necessary. There we go. So a bill that has been passed in many, many states, and I'll wait for Colonel Deckard at 7:33 to tell you how many states have passed a very simple law saying we don't want international law, including Sharia. It's essentially reaffirming the Bill of Rights. It's very basic. It's called American law in American courts. And it is a law that Republicans in Arkansas have been trying to pass ever since 2010, and they haven't been able to do it. And then we get we get more Republicans, we get massive majorities, we get a Republican governor, and the Republican governor won't even pass a law that's been attempted to be passed several times. And it was all because, just like with the Religious Freedom Act that Asa caved on, he caved on religious freedom because the LGBT protested, and he didn't know how to stand up to them because he agreed with them. And just like he didn't want to have to stand up to the Islamists who were at the Capitol protesting this bill as well. Just like he didn't want the sanctuary campus bill because he didn't want to stand up to the, La Raza, the race, and their protests at the Capitol, the Marble Palace in Little Rock. It's all about, he doesn't want it. Asa is more concerned, I said this yesterday, with criticism from leftist groups than he is criticism from the right. I mean, he thinks criticism from the right is hilarious. He just said so. He does not think it is hilarious when he's criticized by La Raza or criticized by Islam groups or criticized by the LGBTQ, RSTLNE, would you like to buy a Val community. He thinks that is very serious, takes it very, very serious. Probably because Walmart takes it very, very serious, which is why he bailed on the Religious Freedom Act in 2015. Joe, I'm sorry, man. You had a thought, and I just kept rambling.
No, it was about the foreign law not being Sharia law comment, but you pretty much flushed that one out. But the one issue I have with this statement, like the whole paragraph, is as we need to stop passing unnecessary laws that attempt to address problems that do not exist. This one is called getting out in front of the problem. Like, that's what this is. The whole point of this was to stop something that very well could possibly happen in the next decade, where Sharia law and some people who practice it would come into the United States
and demand.
Exactly. Yeah. This is getting out in front of the problem.
Well, and
if Asa would get his head out of the sand, he would notice this, and he would know that this is a potential problem.
Joe, he's been practicing law in Arkansas for many years. He's been.
Excuse me. You have an authority. You have authority over me in this scenario. I'm going to step back. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that's you pinned it. That's a Ben Shapiro thing, right?
Saying speaking from a point of authority.
Yeah. Ben Shapiro talks about that all the time. Where if you don't want to really have the argument, so instead it's like, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law, so somehow other people's opinions are now less valid because they're not attorneys, even though we can look at news articles where Sharia law has been argued in American courts.
Well, there's that, but Ben also uses it when he debates someone and they use the point of authority, like that he doesn't have a degree in like biology.
Yeah.
Like,
so how can you talk about
chromosomes? Yeah, exactly. If you don't have a degree in biology, it's like, because I can read and I can look at studies. Exactly. I don't have to be a scientist to be able to read science facts.
It's like David Spade, left to right, top to bottom, group words together in a sentence. That's from Tommy Boy. All right, so again, Colonel Paul Deckard from the Center for Security Policy will be here. He'll be on the phone with us at 7:33, and he's going to address this. And the reason why this is a big deal is because Colonel Paul Deckard was integral in getting this American law and American courts bill passed in the first place. Because State Representative Brant Smith used his testimony in really, really good, smart ways. I mean, it was succinct. There was really very little that you could do to argue with what he was saying because he knows his stuff. He'll be on at 7:33. Going now real quick. You hate Granny. Speaking of leftist talking points, anytime you want to cut the budget, anytime we want to separate out Arkansas Works like Jonathan Dismang said he would, he'd separate the funding. Of course, he didn't. I don't expect him to in the upcoming fiscal session either. I think he's going to go back on his word to the people of Arkansas and his colleagues a second time. But if we ever do start to seriously talk about it, the criticism you get from the left, expectedly, we expect this if you're going to actually do conservative reforms, is you must hate Grandma. You must want Grandma to be thrown out on the street. And what's worse is they do it on Christmas so she gets run over by reindeer. Fiscal conservatives are frustrated. Conduitforaction.org. Fiscal conservatives are frustrated that the tax burden in Arkansas is high in comparison with other states. The cost of Arkansas government is high compared to other states. And yet, Governor Asa Hutchinson says Arkansas has a revenue problem, not a spending problem. Recently, a liberal Democrat Gazette columnist responded to the idea that there should be cuts in the state budget with, "Tough luck, Granny. Anytime state budget cuts are proposed, the liberals and tax and spend politicians shout, this cut will cause Granny to be thrown out of a nursing home." In other words, Arkansas can never have budget cuts. Let's stop there. That's their stance. That's the liberal stance. That's also the stance of Republicans, some establishment Republicans. We can't have budget cuts. I mean, think about that. You propose any kind of cut, you want Grandma to be thrown out of the nursing home. Okay, so we can never cut the budget? Is that what we're saying? We can never do it? Like it's not even an idea. Then why do these Republicans campaign on it? In 2013, liberal supporters of Obamacare Medicaid expansion used Granny and the threat of a Medicaid budget shortfall as a reason Arkansas had to pass Obamacare Medicaid expansion. They used the scare tactic to flip some Republican votes. But after the program was authorized, the talk of a shortfall went away, even though no new federal money would flow to the state for almost a year. In fact, in that year, $300 million was released to spend through the General Improvement Fund, another example of crying wolf. In April 2016, the Hutchinson administration used outrageous predictions of budget cuts if the governor didn't get to continue his version of Obamacare Medicaid expansion, Arkansas Works, as he calls it. He wanted the bogus predictions to scare people so they would put pressure on conservative legislators to let the governor have his Obamacare program. The scare tactics weren't just about Granny. He wanted to scare everybody and used dire projections of cuts for Medicaid, public schools, prisons, libraries, county aid, municipal aid, state police, the school for the blind, the school for the deaf, etc. Although the state fully funded these things before the state began receiving federal funds for Obamacare Medicaid expansion in 2014, he wanted it to look like state services would collapse without it just 2 years later. Do you remember when Obama was forced to do the sequester and did he shut the government down over? When he had to shut down the parks, whenever that was, maybe that had nothing to do with the sequester. I can't remember. Memory's failing me. When he shut down those parks, remember, and then you had park rangers saying that they were told to make this as painful as possible. They were blocking off open air monuments, saying you can't go. I mean, they were doing everything they could to make sure the government, just trying to remind you how much you need the government. That is the same mentality that Asa used last year, or in 2016 rather, when he was trying to get us to continue to fund this program. And it was brutal. It was a leftist tactic. And, it's because he's a leftist. Oh, by the way, Asa just said when you say that, he thinks it's funny. So keep saying it. I mean, come on. right? The state has sovereign immunity. We can't sue them, so it's basically like, the king can do no wrong. So let's all be jesters, and let's all entertain King Asa, and let's just call him a liberal because he thinks it's hilarious and makes him laugh, and let's entertain, and let's just, let's do that for him. I know that's a step too far. Liberals will keep telling you there can never be budget cuts because they need every dime, even the last dime left in your pocket. They want the uninformed to think fiscal conservatives do not care about granting. Conduit for Action affectionately refer to this tactic as pain point politics. It's one of the 7 techniques used to grow government. Pain point politics. The fiscal conservatives, what fiscal conservatives want is to cut out waste and to focus spending on priority items. Granny's not the target. The target of budget cuts is the poor budgeting practices, stupid, wasteful spending, and overspending on low-priority items. Here's an example. Failure to evaluate agencies and programs. When a new annual budget is approved, most agencies get the same percentage budget increase based on what the agency received before. Not only is this wasteful, it's just plain lazy. Each state program needs to be evaluated for priority and efficiency instead of on how much money the state received the previous year. What about this practice of Arkansas, spending everything you have? Politicians love to tell you how they have limited the growth in general revenue spending, but they fail to tell you they spend everything they receive by shifting money into other accounts and spending from those accounts. For example, at one time, general improvement funds were used primarily for capital expenditures if there was sufficient money to do so. Now the fund is used to funnel money into regular operations such as Medicaid and Obamacare Medicaid expansion. And it's used for lots of discretionary spending. The fund has become just another spending account, and to hide spending growth, that should show up as a general revenue expenditure growth. And that's a tricky one. We probably could spend a whole show on that little shell game they're playing right there. What about this waste? Rewarding mismanagement with more money. The governor's recommendation for the travel budget of the Department of Labor was to double the travel budget of the agency in 2017. He kept this recommendation despite, listen to this, the Division of Legislative Audit discovering that the director had spent thousands of dollars on questionable trips. The legislature passed the governor's recommendation, and the waste was rewarded. Now, this was a big story where you have the travel department head going on trips he shouldn't be going on, getting, the taxpayer spending, and yet there's no punishment. They get their budget doubled. Now, what a joke. What a joke. You say that you care about limited government. Yeah, you talk about Asa. There was an article about Asa going on trips, or it was, he's going over to China and trying to recruit these Chinese businesses. Vegas. Yeah, he goes up to the SHOT Show in Vegas. There was some article about how much money he spent on these trips. I mean, with taxpayer dollars and things like that. We probably do need to bring that up. We've got to go, though, because I've gone over. You're going to want to listen to the segment coming up at 7:33 with Colonel Paul Deckert. My name's Paul Harrell. This is Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Other clear ways to cut the waste. Okay, Hutchinson's DHS botched the effort to implement a new computer system for verifying Medicaid recipients. Only after DHS wasted $32 million did they fire the computer contractor. In addition, the estimated cost of the project doubled from $100 million to $200 million. By the way, keep that in mind when you get the postcard to re-elect Hutchinson and he says, I've given you a $150 million tax cut. Well, you waste $200 million like it's nothing. So out of a $5 billion budget, and it's actually almost a $27 billion budget when you consider the federal money that comes back into Arkansas, he's giving the people $150 million back. And $50 million of that is for people that don't even pay taxes. You just got to understand that is so minuscule. That amount, it sounds big because, that's more money than most of us will ever see. But it's minuscule compared to the budget numbers we're talking about. What about spending another $20 million to award a contract to the highest bidder? This is something that ASA did last year. Despite state money problems, an ever-increasing state budget, and legislative opposition, Governor Hutchinson awarded a 3-year contract for information technology services for DHS in the amount of $75.3 million instead of using the contractor bidding of $54.4 million. And this was to the Legislative Council's dismay, and they expressed their opinion, and ASA went ahead and gave the contract, spent $20 million more, and gave it to the higher bidder. Wonder why? What about discretionary spending? Even after the governor had to cut his overly optimistic general revenue budget last year, I guess he claimed a cut this year too, but it wasn't. It was just a cut of the increase. It was still a $172 million increase. The governor gave emergency funds to 3 private colleges in Pulaski County. He gave your tax money to private colleges. This is just one example of his discretionary spending. With the legislature meeting every year, it's time to cut out all discretionary spending by the governor other than on real, actual emergencies. And then, of course, the governor picking winners and losers in business and spending your money. The governor continues to pick winners and losers in business by giving away state funds to private businesses ranging from a taekwondo center. They got a dojo I hear is real nice. To a steel mill seeking to become a competitor to an existing Arkansas steel mill. And yet liberals, and I mean, when I say liberals, I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans, throw Granny out of the nursing home. If you want to make cuts, then you must want to throw Granny out of the nursing home. No. fiscal session of the Arkansas General Assembly begins February 12th. Let's, what if we cut spending and politicians actually did their job? Back in a minute.
You can have exactly what you're talking about. This is why you can have someone say, well, I support, the Second Amendment, but I think we need common sense gun restrictions. Well, you can't do both. You can't support my right to keep and bear while restricting my right to keep and bear. It doesn't make sense. But they think this is okay because they see rights as privileges.
Well, and I'm really interested. It's great that you said that, Dan, because that's exactly what Governor Asa Hutchinson calls our Second Amendment multiple times, even though with public, I don't know what his advisors are telling him. But the guy constantly talks about our Second Amendment privilege. And, and Jan actually has a whole story where she says, you can't say that. And he says rights, privileges, same thing, according to her. Well, they're not the same thing. They're really very different.
They're very different. Jan and I have had this conversation many times. Jan wrote the foreword to my book, and we talk about this. This is probably the biggest, the most important piece here that people need to understand. And there's actually a photo of Jan and me with the it's not a privilege, it's my right, and it's a pretty cool photo. We're both holding guns and stuff, but it's so true because they're starting to really blur the definitions, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, it really, really, truly is. Well, Dan Wass, I appreciate you coming on. It's great to meet you. I'd love to have you on again soon. Your book, by the way,
anytime.
is Good Gun, Bad Guy, and the website once again is. Hang on one second. I just had it in front of me. Yeah, goodgunbadguy.net. And you also have a second book that's out that is a second edition. And so I'm just really, really interested in this. And I love what you're doing. Thank you for standing up for the Second Amendment. And we'll do this again soon.
Oh, thanks so much, Paul. Look forward to it.
Yes, sir. Dan Wass, everybody. Go check out that book if you haven't. That's a excellent interview, just full of knowledge, and really loved that he picked up on this whole right versus privilege thing. That's an important component. I mean, you've got to listen to the words your politicians are using. Words matter. And in this case, Asa has repeatedly, and we'll pull the audio, he's repeatedly said, that this is your Second Amendment privilege. And it's really frustrating. And he does that. In the context of restricting your gun rights, he's using the proper terminology. When he's creating more tape and more permission slips in order to exercise your Second Amendment right, he's actually turning it into a privilege by regulating it. But that's not what the Constitution says. It's not what the Arkansas Constitution says.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you so much. Good morning to everybody out there. Our telephone number, 870-275-9799. Also broadcasting live on Facebook.com/Conduit News. Also our YouTube channel, Conduit News. Check it all out. And we're really excited about all the participation that we are receiving online. It's certainly making the establishment worried. Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. We have Colonel Paul Deckert is with us from the Center for Security Policy. Colonel Deckert, welcome back on the program.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be back with you. How y'all this morning?
We are doing very, very well. It's been a little bit of time since I've talked to you on the show. I know we spoke yesterday. But just want to remind everybody, you were an integral part of getting State Representative Brant Smith's bill, American Law and American Courts, passed out of both committees in the House and Senate and both the chambers, the House and Senate chambers. And, of course, it did become law, but it became law without Asa Hutchinson's signature. And the reason I wanted to have you on is because recently he's in a primary and he's taking criticism for not signing the law. He's taking criticism for opposing the law in the first place. And this is what he said on Talk Business and Politics. Quote, "I've practiced law for many years in Arkansas, and we do not have Sharia law in Arkansas. Let me be clear. I oppose Sharia law. Furthermore, I oppose Sharia law being used in Arkansas courts. The legislation in question addressed the application of foreign law, not Sharia law. We need to stop passing unnecessary laws that attempt to address problems that do not exist. I allowed the bill to become law, even though I thought it was unnecessary, or it was not necessary." End quote. Colonel Paul Deckert, what's your response to those comments?
Regrettably, predictable would be my response. We saw the governor was opposed to this bill, and Representative Smith did an excellent job and took an ocean of personal heat from the governor's surrogates as well as from the governor himself in person over trying to not let this law become law. Now, this particular law, it's like any good deceiver, there's truth in what he says, but it's not the whole truth. He's accurate that this is American laws for American courts is a bill designed to make sure that foreign law from whatever source does not, by inadvertent action or neglect, weave its way into the laws of the state of Arkansas. That is factually what the bill is about. And as we went through the process and I testified, and if I go too long in the tooth, Paul, correct me, because I kind of live this on a pretty regular basis. We have given, and I think there are people that had my testimony taped, definitely on the House side. I think on the Senate side they may have had some other folks that were watching it. Check with your AP guys. But we gave examples. There's a very famous case out of California that is dealing with Japanese law in regard to a state. And the California court, I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, the California court went ahead and allowed that to be accepted, which totally violated the protections that are granted under the Constitution to those citizens from California. There was no due process. There was no opportunity for representation. All of those rights were denied. In most often practice, and the very most famous case is out of Maryland, happens to be an application of Sharia law. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with family court rights, specifically the rights of a mother and her daughter. The case is referred to as Malik. It's out of the state of Maryland. The thumbnail sketches this. Men and women are married in the country of Pakistan. They have a child. The man decides he wants to divorce the woman, so he claims that she has committed adultery. She flees because under the laws in Pakistan, if it's proven so, she would be stoned. And the only ones that can prove it are him making the allegation or her having 4 men say it didn't. Okay? So she flees to the United States. He gets a judgment against her in Pakistan of divorce and to make him the sole custodial parent. Comes to the United States, to the state of Maryland, I believe it was the courts of Baltimore, and gets this judgment, this foreign judgment, accepted in the state of Maryland as the judge who probably had a gazillion things going on, probably had some criminal cases, maybe had somebody else's estate in front of him, and had this domestic case where they were going to, what we call in Louisiana, they were going to naturalize this foreign judgment. And goes ahead and says, well, that's the laws in that country, and under the principles of comedy and so forth, presto changeo, give up the baby. You're divorced, give up the baby.
Wow.
And they, of course, fought it and appealed it and so forth. And that's how we know about it, because it went to an appeals court. Now, this is just the blind acceptance this lady This was done in absentia. She did not have a right. They could have gone through the divorce proceedings here in the United States. It's not saying they couldn't go through the proceedings. It's just that the proceedings, that where you did it and how you did it, denied this woman, who was at the time a U.S. citizen, denied her her right.
Yes.
Okay? So that's kind of what we're talking about. That's kind of the evidence. That's where you get, that's where you get the motivation to make sure these things are done correctly, because there are real people out there that really get hurt when these things are done. And pardon me for droning on a little bit here, but some of the things that the governor said, I was recently asked to speak with some folks in the state of Idaho in regard to this, and I had the ACLU came out, and gotta love them. You see them doing the devil's own work everywhere they show up. God bless them. But the ACLU folks said the same things that the governor said in your article, and that's why I know it's a canned line, because I hear it all over the place.
So you're saying ASA is taking the same line that you've heard the ACLU make in other states?
Yes, that is exactly what I said. And the canned line that the ACLU uses in other states is, and their supporters and their acolytes, is this is a solution in search of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to rewind the tape on that. This is a solution in search of a problem. Anyone who uses a line like that does not grasp Leadership 101. Leadership 101 is proactive and forecast solutions prior to the problem existing.
So let me stop you.
Example.
Yeah. I want to hear the example, but let's just read the beginning. You've laid it all out using ACLU talking points. You've laid out the case in Maryland where we do have this international law, from a civilization that is not compatible under the U.S. Constitution with what they're trying to do. And yet ASA starts his statement by saying, I've practiced law for many years in Arkansas, and we don't have Sharia law here. So that's his excuse, is he's been a lawyer in Arkansas a long time, Colonel Deckert. So we don't need this, and that comes to your point of leadership. Continue, please.
All right, so, again, there's truth in what he says. I believe him. I believe he has practiced law for a long time in Arkansas. And I believe that you do not have Sharia law in Arkansas right now. I believe both of those statements. Now, there's a military principle. You can currently find it in a book by the same name. The theory is called left of bang. Bang is any incident. I'm talking to you from New Orleans. It could be a hurricane, could be an incident. Up where y'all are, you've got New Madrid Fault, an earthquake could be an incident.
Mm-hmm.
Out to the west, it could be a wildfire, could be the incident. Or at Little Rock Airport, it could be a terrorist incident. Whatever the thing is, that's bang. Right of bang is how quickly we respond once there is an incident. Something happens, we respond. That's to the right of it. Left of bang is what we do before bang. Now, there's not a lot I can do pre-earthquake except prepare. There's not a lot I can do pre-hurricane except prepare. For some other man-made things, I can prevent. And there's where the difference comes in. And that's where leadership comes in. What have we seen? It hasn't happened here yet, but it's happening. What have we seen? How do I prepare in order to prevent? And that's what this sort of legislation does. Now, I'm going to give you my example because I kind of like this one. So let's use a fire. What we're talking about is we have seen that there have been fires in buildings. So the legislature, who expresses the will of the people and makes the laws, and sometimes elected officials need to be reminded of that, the legislature who expresses the will of the people and makes the laws says things like, we know there's fires that happen. It hasn't happened in our building yet, but we're going to come up with a rule that says you need to have sprinklers. You need to have sprinklers above the second floor so that if there is a fire, we don't lose the people in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The people who are focusing on, well, we've never had a fire. Okay? You're correct. The building is standing. It has never caught fire. So what's your solution? Let's spend money on bigger engines in the fire truck so they get there faster after the building catches fire. That's your idea of leadership? You want to come up with a better way to respond after it happens, but you don't want to do a doggone thing until it happens. You know, it's the sort of thing where I feel sorry for these timid souls who refuse to lead, because should anything happen, they will never have a night's sleep again if they have any kind of a functioning mind or connected soul, because they know they will have missed the opportunity to do what they were elected to do. So God bless the legislature in the state of Arkansas, because they did lead. They did say, this is a step to make sure that we prevent mothers from having their children taken away from them, because some place other than here came up with a ruling, and we had people that didn't have the clear express will of the legislature to stand on firmly and act. That's all judges do.
Yeah.
Judges simply say, yes, this is in compliance, no, this isn't. Judges don't rule from the bench. Some of them need to be reminded of that, too.
Yeah, they do, for sure. Wow. I mean, that's just really really powerful stuff, and I love that concept, left of bang, right of bang, and it really is, one is what a leader does, and the other is what a leader does not do. And I'm really glad, Colonel Paul Deckert, that you recognize what the Arkansas General Assembly did, because they did stand up to a lot of pressure. On our Facebook feed over at facebook.com/Conduit News, State Representative Brant Smith is watching this interview, and he just said repeatedly, I was told I'm looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And yet, Brant stood up, the legislature stood up, and, the governor didn't want to veto it because there would have been a lot of backlash, so instead he just refuses to sign it. And luckily in Arkansas, if you refuse to sign long enough, it just becomes law without the governor's signature. And so here we have. But now he's taking criticism for that in a primary, and he's coming out and saying the law wasn't necessary. And I think that you have pretty well refuted that. I mean, I was already convinced, but I think a lot of people out there are convinced as well, sir.
Well, first of all, I cannot say enough good about Representative Brant Smith. That is a quality individual. And I know that man stood against near-term political pressure, but he has done work for his church all over the world. He is just a quality individual. He is a very intelligent man. He is a former college professor, and a good one, a real one, not some freak like we have on a lot of campuses out there these days.
Yeah.
Just cannot say enough good about him. And what I'm referring to, and I want to be perfectly clear, that I'm simply stating what the law does and the actions that I've seen. Like I said before, I don't have a cross against Governor Hutchinson per se. I have a cross against some of the actions that people have taken and the things they have said.
Yes.
And if they want to fall into those given buckets, that's on them.
Yeah.
But when I've seen people act a certain way, at some point in time, I have to be a sapient being and draw a conclusion. So, what we've seen and the actions that were taken by the men and women of the legislature, both the House and the Senate in Arkansas, were stellar. And they vigorously debated, and they, pointed out where they thought there were issues, and there were amendments that went back and forth so that this would be in pure, conforming with the laws of the state of Arkansas and the will of their representatives.
And real quick, 'cause we're out of time. We're out of time. But Colonel Paul Deckert, just tell us how many other states have passed this a version of this law that you're intricately involved in all of this across the country.
There's 10 that have passed it. In addition to Arkansas, there are another, I think, 5 that are somewhere in the process as we speak. So this isn't like some bizarre fringe thing. The first ones that passed it, the earliest ones that passed it, Tennessee, Louisiana, were in the beginning, 2003-ish.
Wow.
So, these have been out there for a long time. And when people say things like, well, that's not constitutionally valid. Oh, really? Hello? It's been 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's in place in other places. So they're red herrings. They're throwing. They're like a howler monkey. They poop in their hands and they throw it at you.
Colonel Paul Decker, I appreciate it, sir. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for dropping a lot of truth here on the program today, and be safe, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
All righty, folks. We got to take a break. We're going to be back here in just a minute with Republican senatorial candidate for the special election in District 16, Bob Bailey, checking in. Early voting started yesterday. Back in just a moment.
Our nation's motto, "In God We Trust," first appeared in 1864. Secretary of Treasury Chase stated that no nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe except in His defense. And the trust of our people in God should be declared on our nation's coins. President Dwight Eisenhower then adopted "In God We Trust" as our nation's official motto in 1956. Act 911, enacted by the 2017 Arkansas General Assembly, states that if funds are available, durable framed copies of our nation's motto, "In God We Trust," shall be placed in public school classrooms, libraries, or any publicly maintained facilities. Posters may be donated or provided through voluntary contributions. If you're interested, please contact me at 870-275-2929. This is Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the program. We got a big special election that's going on right now. Early voting kicked off yesterday. It's in the Russellville area. It's the Senate District 16, it's a pretty large district. And joining us now is Republican candidate Bob Bailey. Bob, welcome back, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Sorry we got cut off yesterday when we did this. We lost your signal and we were running out of time. But how was the first day of early voting, sir?
Well, I've been told that the turnout has been way up considered to past elections. They seems to be a lot more people in. Reason they had about just a little less than 300 voting yesterday, here in Polk County. I don't know about the other districts, but they say that is pretty good turnout for the first day.
Yeah, well, that's really good. I really want to just kind of cut to the chase here because, you've been on the program several times. You're not an establishment guy. You're an anti-establishment guy. You're running against establishment candidates that have the backing of everybody, who is somebody. You've got people backing your opponent who is, they live in Little Rock. They're lobbyists. They're down there all the time. They depend on it. As we look at the tax increases that failed and the tax increases that they want to bring back up, like the same ones, whether it's the internet, whether it's the gas tax or whatever, I think it's clear that the Republican who wins this special election is going to be asked by Republican leaders to raise people's taxes. And I want to know what you have to say about that.
Everybody that I have talked to thinks they're being taxed into oblivion. This internet tax thing keeps popping up. It's like, I like to be able to buy online and not have to pay a dadgum state tax. I hate the thought of an internet tax, and I don't believe these people are going to quit until it happens. If I get down there, they can figure on me not voting for it. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Is I just wanted people to understand the amount of pressure that's going to be applied, and the where the party is going, where the leadership is going, and they're going for more government. And so you really have, as a voter, I think it's helpful to consider, what is this guy or girl or guy, what are they going to be asked to do that goes against my wishes? And I think, when you look at the tax increases, the spending growth, all of that stuff, they're going to be asked to continue these policies. And you being an anti-establishment guy, I just wanted to make sure people know what the stakes are, Bob.
Have you ever talked to anybody that actually liked to get taxed? Really.
There may be some liberals that give it lip service. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, every time we turn around, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like every other week they're trying to pass another dadgum tax on something. I don't know if these people just sit around a table and say, what are we going to tax today? But that's what it seems like to me sometimes, and I just can't stand that stuff. Now, there is a very big push by the PACs on my opposition to get her in there. And it's clearly, you're going to either vote for me or you're going to vote for her, and there's no middle ground there. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have a clear choice. Either you're going to vote for the way it's been and it's going to be, or you're going to vote for me.
Yeah. I agree. It's status quo versus, anti-establishment, and you just got to ask what if you want to look at who's supporting what candidate financially, it's sort of, you just have to ask yourself the question: what are people getting from their support? And if the goal is limited government and more freedom for everybody on one side, and the other goal is status quo, all of these lobbyists are going to make sure they have somebody that's going to vote for their interests, but not necessarily everybody else's interest. That right there is all you need to know.
Yeah, I think it is. We've got a booth out there. We've got a little pop-up tent, and I've got 3 4x8 campaign signs on it, so you can't miss it.
Good.
And I've had several people stop by that I didn't even know that told me, we voted for you. We wanted to meet you. You're hitting the right chords and saying what we want to hear. And what it's going to amount to is the groups of people. It seems like the people that stop by my booth are older people.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are voting for her are younger people. So what it's going to amount to is, is she going to have enough of a turnout by the younger people to outvote the older people. I mean, that's where we're at. That's what we're saying.
And unfortunately, some of those younger people are just not educated and informed, and they're using, I think, friendships and the cult of personality. They're maybe more loyal to that, and we've been fighting that for a long time. Hey, you're my Sunday school teacher. Hey, you're this, so I'm going to vote for you regardless of what your policies are. Early voting started yesterday. Keep going out and voting. Bob Bailey, we got like 20 seconds. I'll give you the last word, sir.
Just get out there and vote. Vote your convictions. That's all I can say.
All righty. All right. Thanks, Bob Bailey. We appreciate it. We'll get another update from you tomorrow, sir, okay?
All right. See you tomorrow.
All righty. Folks, that's all the time. We are out of time. Arkansas, be safe.